Didn't make a sound. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, the one they'd shoved me into when I moved in 18 months ago. The one with the broken slat under the mattress that I'd learned to sleep around. And I listened to my son and his wife talk about me like I wasn't 30 feet away. The bedroom door was thin. The hallway was quiet. And Nicole's voice carries. I am done pretending I'm okay with this, James. She's your mother, not mine. I didn't sign up to share my home with a sick old woman who can't even take care of herself. I heard my son say something low. I couldn't make out the words. No, James, I mean it this time. Either she goes or I start looking at apartments. For myself, you choose. I didn't cry. That surprised me. A year ago, those words would have broken me in half. But I'd had months to see this coming, the way you watch a storm build on the horizon and try to convince yourself it'll pass. It never passed. It just finally arrived. My name is Loretta. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a registered nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. I raised 2 children, mostly alone after my husband, Carl, passed from a stroke when our kids were still in middle school. I worked double shifts. I drove them to practice, to recitals, to SAT prep. I didn't take vacations. I didn't buy myself things. Everything I had, I put into them. I'm telling you this not for pity. I'm telling you so you understand what it meant when I agreed to sell my condo and move into my son's house. It was James's idea, originally. He and Nicole had bought a beautiful 4-bedroom in Decatur, plenty of space, good neighborhood. When I got my diagnosis, atrial fibrillation, nothing immediately life-threatening but serious enough to require monitoring, medication adjustments, the occasional scare. James sat across from me at my kitchen table and said, Mom, it doesn't make sense for you to be alone. Come stay with us. Save your money. Be close to the grandkids. I hesitated. I want to be honest about that. Something in me knew it wasn't right. Moving into someone else's home at 66, I'd always been independent. I'd always had my own space. But I was tired. I was a little scared, and I genuinely believed that Nicole was on board. She smiled at me during that conversation. She said, We'd love to have you, Loretta. She hugged me. I thought she meant it. I sold my condo for $285,000. I put $200,000 into a joint account that James and I set up to cover home renovation costs. We were supposed to add a proper in-law suite, accessible bathroom, the works. The other $85,000 I kept in my own savings account. The renovation never happened. There was always a reason. The contractor fell through. Then the plans needed to be revised. Then Nicole thought maybe they'd rather use the money to upgrade the kitchen first, since the whole family used it. Then it was just, We'll get to it, Mom, we will. I stopped bringing it up after a while. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. I was living in the guest room with my suitcase pushed against the wall and my medications lined up on the nightstand, and I told myself it was temporary. That was 18 months ago. The room never got bigger. The suite never got built. And the $200,000 sat in a joint account while their kitchen got new quartz countertops and a refrigerator with a screen on the door. Nicole and I had a surface-level politeness for the first few months. She was not warm, but she was civil. She didn't include me in plans, but she didn't exclude me rudely. I watched the grandkids after school sometimes. Their daughter Amara was 8. Their son Theo was 5. And those hours were the best part of my days. Amara used to climb up next to me on the couch and want me to tell her about when her daddy was little. I loved that. I held on to that. The shift happened gradually, the way these things do. Nicole started making comments. Small ones at first. Are you sure you should be eating that with your heart? In front of dinner guests. James, your mom left her pill bottles on the counter again. Not to me, to James. About me. As if I weren't in the room. As if I'd already become furniture. Inconvenient furniture she hadn't chosen and couldn't return. Then it became less subtle. She started scheduling family dinners on nights she knew I had doctor's appointments, so I'd come home to a cleared table and Tupperware in the fridge. She stopped relaying my phone messages. She rearranged the pantry and put my things on the bottom shelf, the shelf I had to kneel down to reach, which she knew was hard on my knees. When I mentioned it, she looked at me with that particular smile women use when they want you to know they did something deliberately but won't admit it. Oh, I didn't even think about that. I'll try to remember for next time. She never moved them. James noticed none of this, or noticed and said nothing, which amounts to the same thing. I want to be fair to my son. He is not a cruel man. He is a conflict-avoidant man who loves his wife very much and has, over the years, learned that peace in his home comes at a price he is usually willing to pay. I understood that about him even when it hurt. But understanding something doesn't make it not hurt. The night I heard them arguing, it had been a difficult week. I'd had a cardiology follow-up that flagged some irregular readings. Nothing emergency level, but the kind of news that sits on your chest for days. I'd come home and told James quietly, while Nicole was putting Amara and Theo to bed. He'd hugged me and said, "We'll figure it out, Mom," and I had believed him. What I didn't know was that he'd told Nicole afterward, and Nicole had not reacted the way a caring person reacts. I heard it in her voice through that thin door. Not concern? Calculation. This is only going to get worse, James. You know that. If her heart is already doing this at 67, what does the next 5 years look like? The next 10? I am not going to spend my 40s being a caregiver for your mother in my own home. I'm sorry, but I'm not. She's not asking you to be her caregiver. She doesn't have to ask. That's how it works. She's here, she gets worse, and we're the ones stuck with it. I love you. I love our kids, but I did not agree to this. There was a long silence. Give her a timeline, Nicole said. Something reasonable. 2 months. She has money, James. She'll be fine. And my son who I drove to his first day of kindergarten, who I sat with in the ER when he broke his arm at 14, who I worked 2 jobs to put through Georgia Tech, said, "Okay, I'll talk to her." I lay down on that bed with the broken slat, and I looked at the ceiling and I thought about everything very clearly. I was not going to cry. I was not going to beg. I was not going to have an emotional confrontation that they could later describe as me being unstable or difficult. I was going to plan. The next morning, I called my friend Paulette, who is 70 years old and sharp as a tack, and has been my closest friend since we worked the same floor at Grady in 1998. I told her what I'd heard. She didn't say, "Are you sure?" She didn't say, "Maybe you misunderstood." She said, "Loretta, what do you need?" That's the kind of friend everyone deserves and not everyone gets. I also called my attorney, a woman named Sandra who had handled my estate documents for 15 years. I told her I needed to review my will and my financial arrangements and specifically the joint account situation. She had an opening on Thursday. I took it. James came to me 2 days later with the expression of a man carrying something heavy and hoping someone else will offer to take it. He sat in the chair by my window. He said things like, "We've been thinking and it might be better for everyone, and you'd have more independence." He did not say, "My wife wants you out." He dressed it up so carefully that you would almost not recognize it as what it was. I let him finish. Then I said, "How long?" He looked relieved that I wasn't yelling. "We were thinking maybe 60 days, so you have time to find something comfortable." 60 days, I repeated. "We love you, Mom. This isn't." "I know," I said. "I'll start looking." He left the room looking lighter than when he'd come in. That told me everything I needed to know about where his primary loyalty lived. I want to pause here and tell you what 60 days actually felt like from the inside. It felt like being handed a timer and told to disappear. I was 67 years old, recovering from a health scare, sleeping in a room that had never been made properly mine, and my son had just handed me a countdown. You process things in pieces when they're that big. 1 hour I was fine, making lists, being practical. The next hour, I was sitting on the edge of the tub in the bathroom with the door locked, just to cry somewhere I had a little privacy. I gave myself those moments. I didn't fight them. Then I got up and went back to planning. My attorney Sandra was wonderful. The first thing we addressed was the joint account. Here's what most people don't know about joint accounts. When two people put money in, the legal trail of who contributed what matters enormously if the relationship deteriorates. I had documentation, bank transfers, dated records showing that $200,000 of the $215,000 currently in that account had come from the sale of my condo, deposited by me. The renovation project had been the stated purpose. The renovation had never happened. Sandra advised me on a formal letter requesting the return of my contribution, citing the original purpose of the funds and the failure to execute the agreed-upon project. She was calm and thorough and used words like unjust enrichment and breach of informal agreement in ways that made very clear what our options were if James chose to be difficult. He did not choose to be difficult. He did not choose to be difficult. I think he'd expected me to leave quietly, the way people expect older women to absorb injustice quietly, to prioritize peace over fairness, to not make things complicated. I had done that my whole life. I was done doing it. When James received the letter, Sandra sent it formally, because informal conversations were no longer sufficient. He called me. He was not angry exactly. He was stunned. Like a man who had walked into a room expecting the furniture to be where he left it and found it all rearranged. Mom, you hired a lawyer? I have a lawyer, James. I've had her for 15 years. She helps me manage my affairs. But the letter is accurate. I put $200,000 into that account for a specific purpose. The purpose was never fulfilled. I'd like it returned. A long silence. I need to talk to Nicole. That's fine. Sandra's contact information is in the letter. He called back 3 days later. The money would be returned. There was no argument, no legal fight. I think in some part of himself, James knew this was the right outcome. And I think he was also, for the first time, understanding that his mother was not the passive figure he had come to see her as. I had 40 days left on their timeline. I didn't use all of them. Paulette knew a woman in her church community who managed senior-friendly apartment complexes. Not assisted living, just good buildings with accessible features, elevator access, maintenance included, close to transit. She helped me get a tour of a building in Brookhaven, maybe 20 minutes, from James's house in Decatur. 2-bedroom unit on the 4th floor, south-facing windows with good light. A kitchen that was mine. A bathroom where I could put my things without them being moved. I put down a deposit with my own money, my untouched $85,000, while waiting for the $200,000 transfer to clear. I told James I was moving out on a Saturday, 3 weeks before his deadline. He looked surprised. Already? I found something I like. Nicole wasn't home. She had taken Amara and Theo to soccer. When I carried my last box to Paulette's car, Paulette had driven over to help me. James stood on the front porch and watched. I could see him struggling with something. Guilt, maybe? Or the particular grief of watching a consequence you caused arrive in real time. He said, "Mom, I want you to know this wasn't James," I said quietly. "I know you love me. I love you, but what happened here is something we're both going to have to sit with for a while. I'm not angry. I'm just honest." He nodded. He looked very young in that moment, which is not something I had expected to feel, that old reflexive tenderness for him. I carried it with me into the car and I let myself feel it, and I also let myself drive away. My apartment was ready the following Tuesday. I moved in with Paulette's help and my daughter Renee, who had flown in from Denver specifically to help. Renee had known from the beginning that the arrangement with James was fragile. She had offered, twice, for me to come stay with her instead. I hadn't wanted to displace her family, but she was here now, carrying boxes and hanging my curtains and ordering takeout from the Thai place down the block. "You okay?" she asked that first night, after the boxes were more or less sorted and we were sitting on my floor eating pad see ew and drinking sparkling water. "Yeah," I said. "I actually think I am." The apartment was quiet in the way I had forgotten existed. My own quiet, with my own thermostat set to my own temperature and my medications on the bathroom counter where I put them, and not a single cabinet or shelf managed by someone else's preferences. I lay in my own bed that night and slept better than I had in a year and a half. The $200,000 transferred into my account 6 weeks after James received Sandra's letter. I used a portion of it to furnish the apartment properly. A good sofa, a real dining table, a bed frame I actually chose. I kept the rest in savings. I also updated my will. I had listed James as primary beneficiary, which had reflected where things stood before that night, before I heard Nicole's voice through the guest room door, before 60 days. I didn't remove him entirely. He is still my son, and I love him in the complicated, permanent way you love someone who has disappointed you without stopping being yours. But I structured things differently. I established a direct educational trust for Mara and Theo that bypasses James and Nicole entirely. Whatever I leave is going to my grandchildren, not to their parents' hands. Sandra thought it was a sensible arrangement. I think so too. Here is what happened after. Nicole called me 2 months after I moved out. This surprised me. I had not expected her to be the one to reach out first. Her voice was different. Not warm, exactly, but careful. She said she'd been thinking about how things had gone and she wanted to say that maybe it had been handled badly. She stopped short of an apology. You know the kind, the apology-shaped statement that contains no actual accountability. I thanked her for calling. I kept my voice even. I did not tell her what I thought of her in any detail. James came to visit me at the apartment about 6 weeks after I moved in. He brought Amara and Theo. Amara ran in and immediately started investigating my new place, opening the kitchen cabinets, peering out the windows, announcing that it was actually really nice, Grandma. Theo climbed onto my couch and asked for a snack within about 30 seconds of arriving, which I found very reassuring. James and I had a long conversation that afternoon after the kids were settled watching something on my TV. It wasn't a repair, not exactly. It was more like an acknowledgement. Two people who had been through something difficult sitting together and saying so out loud without pretending it hadn't happened. He told me he was sorry. He didn't dress it up or make excuses. He just said, "I should have done better by you, Mom." I know that. I believe he meant it. I also know that sorry doesn't rewind time. It doesn't return 18 months of small indignities, of feeling like a guest in my own family, of lying awake on a broken mattress listening to someone decide my timeline. But it matters. It's a beginning. Amara still wants me to tell her stories about when her daddy was little. I do this gladly. Theo eats half my snack cabinet every time he visits. I keep it stocked. Paulette and I have a standing Tuesday lunch now, alternating between a Brazilian place in Decatur and a seafood spot near the apartment that does the best shrimp and grits I've ever had in my life. I walk 2 miles every morning. My cardiologist says my numbers has stabilized, better than stabilized, actually improved. She asked what changed. I told her I moved. She laughed. Then she realized I wasn't joking. I have not forgotten what Nicole said through that door. I don't think I'm supposed to forget it. I think some things you carry forward as information about who people are, about what your presence means to them, about the difference between a family that wants you and a family that tolerates you. That information has changed how I move through the world. I am less willing to make myself small. I am less afraid of being inconvenient. I was 67 years old, recovering from a cardiac scare, freshly exiled from my son's home with a 60-day countdown, and I came out the other side with my money, my dignity, my own apartment, and my grandchildren's futures secured in a trust. I did not cry in front of them. I did not beg. I did not make myself small to make them comfortable. I planned. And when I drove away from that house for the last time, I felt something I hadn't felt in a year and a half. The specific, steady peace of a woman who knows exactly who she is and has decided, firmly, that is enough. I keep coming back to that broken slat in the mattress. The one I'd learned to sleep around for 18 months. I never complained about it. I told myself it was a small thing, not worth the discomfort of bringing up. And I think that right there, that small, quiet decision to make myself comfortable with being uncomfortable, is where I have to be honest with myself about my own part in how things unfolded. Not blame. Just honesty. Because the truth is, the way people treat us is often a reflection of what we've shown them will accept. Nicole didn't become cruel overnight. She tested, and I adjusted. She moved my things, and I worked around it. She scheduled dinners during my appointments, and I ate Tupperware leftovers alone and said nothing. I was so focused on being gracious, on not being a burden, on preserving a peace that was never really mine to preserve, that I slowly taught everyone in that house that I could be managed. That's not a comfortable thing to admit, but I think it matters. What changed wasn't Nicole. What changed was me. The night I heard her voice through that door, something in me stopped adjusting. I stopped calculating how to make myself smaller. I started calculating something else entirely. How to stand back up with my dignity intact and my finances protected, and my grandchildren's future secured in a way that no one could undo with a bad marriage or a bad decision. That required a kind of clear-eyed thinking I hadn't let myself do in a long time. Not anger, not revenge fantasies, just clear, steady thinking. What do I actually have? What do I actually need? What steps, in what order? Paulette used to say that the most underrated thing a woman can have is a good attorney and a best friend who picks up on the first ring. She wasn't wrong. Wisdom isn't just what you know. It's knowing who to call and when. And then it required something harder than thinking. It required action when every instinct in me wanted to avoid conflict, to wait and see, to give James one more chance to do the right thing without being asked. I had to override that instinct. I had to be willing to be inconvenient, to be the kind of woman who sends formal letters and requests meetings and does not apologize for knowing her own worth. That is not easy at 67. It is not easy at any age. But I think it is the only thing that actually works. James said he was sorry. I believe him. But I also know that his apology came after the letter, not before. People tend to find their decency when the alternative has a real cost. That's not cynicism. That's just how human nature operates, and understanding it clearly, without bitterness, without illusion, is what allowed me to protect myself without destroying the relationship entirely. Amara climbed onto my new couch the first time she visited and announced that my apartment was actually really nice. Theo ate half my snack cabinet. James and I sat at my table and talked like two adults who had been through something real. I did not get that by waiting for someone else to do right by me. I got it by doing right by myself first, with integrity, with clear thinking, and with the kind of steady nerve that doesn't announce itself but simply holds. That's what I'd want anyone to take from this. Not the money, not the legal strategy, the willingness to hold.